start recording. Neil, the floor is yours.
Hi, hello. Can you hear me and see me okay? I hope so. Okay, well, hi everyone. Glad to see you all here. I will be asking you to participate in the chat, and I'm going to take a moment every now and again to have a look at the Q&A and see if you have any questions. Okay, so as Sean said, today we're going to speak to you about some communicative activities, on why sometimes the communicative activity goes well and why sometimes it doesn't. We're going to look at some activities where speaking about a topic leads to the practice of some language structures, and also though some activities where the language structures themselves are the topic. And in the second part of the session, Terry's going to look at teaching online and how breakout rooms are really a great, powerful tool for setting up successful communicative activities. So I guess we first need to define what we mean by a successful communicative activity. So here's the first bit of chat interaction. Can you write in the chat how you know if a communicative activity has been successful? What kind of things do you notice in the class? What kind of things do you notice from your students? Are there any outcomes you notice? Things like that. How do you know, thinking about your context and your students, if a communicative activity has been successful? Oh, so let's see if there's some things on the chat. Okay, oh, it's flying it. Okay, so they ask more questions. It's still going on outside of class. Students respond, students are engaged, interaction, participating. You get response, facial expressions. Yes, so people are smiling, able to apply information. Okay, loads and loads of great. They're not silent. Exactly. Well, that's very similar to actually what I came up with. So here's some ideas that I had. Learners communicate a lot. I mean, in the class, it tends to be spoken communication, but of course, we can do written communicative activities. They communicate a lot. They use language that is connected to our learning objectives. So that could be a grammar structure, it could be a lexical area. There's some meaningful communication, and there's some correction. So that's either on the spot correction or delayed if necessary. Okay, great. So moving on. I think it's fair to say as well that the first one is probably the most important, as you know, the other three cannot occur if we don't have the first one. So a successful communicative activity is one where learners communicate or speak a lot. So I would say that the key to a successful communicative activity is having engaged learners who are motivated to participate. And today we'll try and unpick the elements of an activity that can make it more or less motivating for learners to participate. I saw someone there saying something about stopping the flow with correction, and we are going to look at that and have different types of correction. Okay, and this actually going on to speak about something that was in the Q&A. Someone was already asking about intrinsic and extrinsic intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So we do normally talk about those two things when we speak about motivation. I've got there a picture of a carrot. Now, a carrot is a well-known metaphor for motivation. So I'd like you to just put in the chat if you think a carrot, or the metaphor of a carrot, is typical of intrinsic or extrinsic motivation. So we all know that the idea of the carrot and the stick. You have a donkey, you want him to go in a certain direction. Oh yeah, we're continuing the theme of carrots throughout it, so great. You want your donkey to go in a certain area, you can discipline him with a stick, or you can try and motivate him with a carrot. So everybody's saying extrinsic. Yes, exactly. So great. Let's move forward here. So yes, the first three letters of both those words give us a clue as to their meaning. Intrinsic motivation comes internally from within a person. Extrinsic motivation comes from external sources. So, you know, a carrot is an external reward. Well, it's external unless you've eaten the carrot cake, then the carrot might be internal. But normally, and it's an external reward for doing something. So if your donkey goes where you want them to go, they get a carrot. And if we think of household chores, there are some people who do household chores because they enjoy living in a clean, ordered space. There are other people who do them because they don't want to annoy the people they live with, or they have already annoyed the people they live with, and they're doing some household chores to stop that annoyance continuing. And of course, there are people who have no motivation to do household chores at all, and they don't do them. So let's apply that to language learning. Can you think of some factors that might motivate a learner to learn a language, and say whether you think that would be intrinsic, is an intrinsic motivation or an extrinsic motivation? Loris has a cleaner. Great. Okay. Very good. So I guess you extrinsically motivate the cleaner to clean your house by paying them. But thinking about learners and English learners, what do you think? What motivates them to learn English? Thinking about your context. Okay, a job promotion, they want to travel and communicate. They can have both. Exams are extrinsic. Okay, I mean, if the language is applied to their lives, it could be intrinsic, some praise, it's fun. Okay, great. So loads of good ideas. Here are some things that I came up with. Oh, sorry, skip forward one. So intrinsic motivation could be things such as, enjoying the learning process, getting a sense of achievement from gaining mastery of the language, or that you find, having a knowledge of English is personally enriching. It opens the door to English language culture. That's books, that's films, that's music. Extrinsic motivation comes from maybe having a particular purpose. So, you want to be able to speak English. You have a particular purpose for wanting to be able to speak English. And those could be things like, getting a good job, graduating from university, maybe moving to an English-speaking country. Now, the problem with extrinsically motivating factors is normally that they're beyond our control as teachers. And the other problem with extrinsically motivating factors is that, you're not really motivated to learn English. You're really motivated to get a good job. Learning English is really a means to an end. Intrinsic motivation, and I think this was the question in the Q&A, what's more effective, intrinsic or extrinsic motivation for self-learning, is that intrinsic motivation tends to be longer lasting and effective as you're doing something that you enjoy and you gain satisfaction from it. If you think about it, once you have the good job or you've graduated from university, the motivation to learn English may just go away or disappear. And really another reason to be wary of extrinsic motivation is that if something already has elements of that are intrinsically motivating, extrinsically motivating factors can distract from that, from the internal personal satisfaction, and actually can start to reduce your intrinsic motivation levels. So really, I think intrinsic motivation is the key to, motivated learners. Okay, great. So that's, a quick look at motivation. And what I want to do now is we're going to look at an activity that I found to be, 100% motivating. This always works. Always my students, my learners are always motivated to do this. And I want to have a look to see if we can see what makes them motivated. Now, this won't be a new activity for most of you, and that's good. I want you to know this activity because I want you to be able to reflect on your experience of this activity. And that activity is the classic vocabulary revision game called Backs to the Board. Okay, so very quickly, I would just like you to put yes or no in the chat box as to whether you know this activity. Do you know the activity Backs to the Board? Okay, and while you're doing that, I'm just going to explain it in case anybody doesn't know it. So this is a great activity for the end of the class, okay? You're going to just split your class into two groups, Group A and Group B, and you're going to ask each group to sit on either side of the class. Okay, so now you place 2 seats in front of the board with their backs to the board, hence the name. And you ask one person from each group to sit in each of the seats facing away from the board. So now you're going to write a bit of vocabulary, you're going to write it up on your whiteboard or your blackboard, and each group has to explain the word to the person from their group, the one sitting on the seat, without using the word or gestures. And the first person to guess it gets the point. And you should say at the start how many points a group needs to win. Okay, I can see Mariana there is calling it hot seat. There's a lot of you know it, some of you don't. And honestly, if you haven't been using this activity, you're going to love it. It's great. Okay, so most of you do know it, I think. What I want you to do now in the chat box, why do you think this is so motivating? Students always love this activity. They always want to participate in that activity. What elements of this activity do you think are motivating? What are the ingredients of this activity that you think get students really motivated? Let's see your ideas. They want to win. Okay, great. Competition. It's challenging. It's fun and engaging. They like it. Competition, pride, teamwork. Wow, it's going really fast. It's intrinsically motivating. The elements of the game. It's fun. Competition. Fantastic. Okay, yes. These are the things that I also thought of. Okay, so when I was thinking about why this is such a big hit with my students, I thought, look, it's competitive. It's collaborative, it's challenging. And what do we mean by challenging? It's difficult, but it's doable, it's achievable, okay? And it's meaningful. So that the words on the board are from the day's lesson, you know, they're clearly linked to their learning goals. So the purpose of this activity is it's not opaque, it's transparent. They can see why they're doing it, and it's fun. You know, you can't underestimate that it is fun. So let's look at these 5 elements in relation to what we said about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So the fun element clearly is intrinsic, as it means learners are enjoying the learning process. Let's put the next 2 together, so challenging and meaningful. So again, these mean that it's a satisfying learning process. There's a personal satisfaction from achieving something challenging, and more so if you can see the purpose of doing it. Collaboration, again, is linked to intrinsic motivation. As humans, we have a basic psychological need, you know, for relatedness, and working with others in a team helps us achieve that. Yes, Mona is saying about social bonding. Great, okay. And finally, that last element, that it's competitive. So I think this could be considered either extrinsic or intrinsic. I mean, maybe if you got a prize for winning, that would be extrinsic motivation. But I don't know about you guys. I don't tend to offer cash prizes for winning my vocabulary revision activities. So I think it's more about, you know, the personal satisfaction of winning and outdoing your classmates. Okay, so let's have a look. We can see that it's mostly an intrinsically motivating activity, and it just has a little sprinkling of extrinsic motivation on the top just to increase the overall levels of motivation. Okay, so and in fact, just quickly an aside, speaking of increasing the motivation levels for back to the board, I have to say I added an element to this activity that sent motivation levels through the roof, and that element was a bell. Just a bell that you'd get at a reception desk. So I put the bell between the 2 people guessing, and they have to ring the bell before they can give an answer. And you know what? It turns out people just love ringing bells. They go crazy for the opportunity to ring a bell. So if they were already motivated by this activity, put a bell in the middle, and they go crazy. So obviously a bell is an example of extrinsic motivation. However, you know, I think there is something intrinsically satisfying about just ringing a bell. Okay, so I hope we agree that we have established some good criteria for what makes a speaking activity very Pavlovian. Yes, I don't know if they're slobbering when I'm ringing the bell, hopefully not. We've got some criteria for what makes a speaking activity motivating, and the ratios of intrinsic to extrinsic motivation we should hope to tap into. So way more intrinsically motivating elements than extrinsically motivating ones. So let's look at a couple of other activities that I hope I can show you also fit into these criteria. So if they're new activities, I hope you'll be convinced to use them because you'll see that they fit our criteria and they are going to be motivating and help the success of your communicative activities. And if they're ones you already know, maybe you're going to have another look at them because again, as you see, they'll fit this criteria. Okay, the first activity is called Blockbusters. Okay, now this is a version of a 1980s TV quiz show called Blockbusters. Now I'm going to give away my age here. I have a deep affinity with this show because back in 1989, I received a copy of the board game Junior Blockbusters for Christmas. So I have been playing Blockbusters for decades. Now, the premise of this show is very simple. Each of these hexagons has a letter that represents the first letter of the answer to a general knowledge question. And if you get the answer correct, you get to keep the square. Does this board game familiar to people? Are there people that know it? I know this is a very global audience, and Blockbusters was on in Ireland, in the UK, in America. Maybe it was syndicated in other places. I don't know. But anyway, I'll explain how it works. You win by basically collecting enough squares. So as you can see, look at the sides of the board, and you can see that the sides are colored. Okay, yes, some of you no. Okay, so look, the vertical lines are red, and the horizontal lines at the top of the bottom are black. And these represent the two teams. Okay, so there's the black team and the red team. And if you collect enough squares to connect your team sides together, you're the winner. You can see this is how the red team would win, and this is how the black team would win. Okay, as you can see, only one team can connect their sides. A little bit like noughts and crosses, I guess, but a bit more complicated. Only one team can connect their sides, and you don't have to follow any order in what square you choose. You can choose whatever square. So you can always choose whether to be going for connecting your sides or to block the opposing team. Right, so I saw someone, how do we adapt this to ELT? So let's see. Basically, we're going to adapt this to ELT by putting a language item in each of the squares. So the learners can win this square by successfully creating a sentence that includes the language item. So in this case, the language item is, if I were you. So a successful attempt would be, if I were you, I would play Blockbusters with your students. If you have a small group and you're lucky enough to have a projector, you can project the board onto the whiteboard, and you can color in the squares as they win them with a marker. If you don't have a projector, you can print it out, stick it on the whiteboard. Of course, if you have a large group, you can print out a board for multiple games to go on at once. And importantly here, I think when teams attempt a sentence, you should encourage the other team to say, if it's a correct sentence or not, and why. If they think it's incorrect, why? Of course, you as the teacher should be the ultimate judge of whether someone wins a square or not, if there's any controversy. Through Zoom, I think you could play this through Zoom, Angelina. Terry's going to look at some kind of online activities in the next session, but yes, I do think this could be adapted to Zoom. Okay, let's have a look at a board. So this is a board that I have filled with hypothetical language and conditional sentence structures. But this is easily adapted. You could put in anything really. You could put in normal adjectives like good and bad, and you could ask learners to come up with the extreme adjective version, excellent or terrible. And you could put in irregular verbs and ask learners to use the past simple or past participle versions, really whatever you like. It's really adaptable to whatever language point you are working with in the class. Is there an online version? I don't know, Alina. There may well be. I mean, I guess Blockbusters own the rights to Blockbusters, so they might have their own website. I don't know, but I think you can recreate it very easily on PowerPoint, and you could just share that on over Zoom or over Teams or over whatever it is that you use. Okay, let's see why I shared this with you today. Let's see if it meets our 5 motivating criteria. So the first one was competitive. And yes, it's competitive. Both teams are trying to outdo each other to win, so it's clearly competitive. Collaborative. Okay, so I think this is the key element of Blockbusters. I always think this activity is best done in pairs working together against another pair, as this obviously provides us with the collaborative element. The topic the learners are speaking about, it's a communicative activity, but they're not speaking about their last holiday or their favorite food. Sorry, I'm just going to go back here. I've just lost the slide, but I've got it again. Okay, sorry, now I can see the slide again. Okay, so as I was saying, it's a communicative activity, but they're not speaking about, you know, the last holiday they went on. They're not debating different debating topics, but rather the language that they're learning is the target language, is the topic of the communicative activity. And they're going to work together to combine their knowledge of the target language to create a sentence that they think is correct. You know, this is actually a safe space to test their hypothesis on the structures of their language with a peer before providing a collective answer. Again, you know, this is a safer way of experimenting. And actually, this kind of meta talk about the subject that you're learning is known as dialogic talk, and it fits in with sociocultural theories of learning. You know, by exploring what we're learning through talk, we deepen and we extend our knowledge of what we're learning. Students who are speaking about the language itself are more likely as well to become intrinsically motivated learners because they're getting involved with the learning process and they're not so focused on the learning results. Okay, let's move on. Is it challenging? Well, I mean, really, this is as challenging as you want it to be, depending on the language structures that you use. So really up to you, the level of challenge. Is it meaningful? Again, so I think the purpose of this activity should be really clear to your learners. They're participating, they're practicing, sorry, the structures that make up the learning objectives of the class. So when learners see a clear purpose to the activity they're doing, this helps to increase motivation. So it also helps them with things like, you know, a growth mindset and feel learner agency, because they can see that by participating in this activity, they're going to positively affect their learning. And that's really quite motivating. So a quick comment, we touched on this at the start, on correction during speaking activities. So we can choose to correct our learners directly with on-the-spot correction, or indirectly, that is delayed correction. So I want you to just quickly pop in the chat box what kind of correction you think would be most appropriate here. On the spot, immediate correction, or delayed. And while you're typing, I'm going to just explain that a bit more. So normally when we have a speaking activity, we're looking to either improve our learners' accuracy or their fluency. So if we're looking to improve accuracy, we should be correcting on the spot. Yes, and so that learners can see exactly where they have made a mistake in the structure they're using. If we're looking to improve fluency, then we should use delayed correction. That is, collect some examples of your learner's language to put on the whiteboard and you know, look at it afterwards. It's really hard to be fluent if your teacher keeps interrupting you to correct you for little errors. And I can see most of you there are saying yes, on the spot, on the spot, on the spot. And I think that's right. This is an accuracy exercise. So on the spot correction is what we want. Okay, finally, is this fun? Well, I mean, I guess fun is a subjective question, isn't it? So I would say that in my experience, learners tend to be having great fun. You know, what could be more fun than blocking your classmates' path to victory by winning a square that they wanted? Okay, so I think you can see it meets the criteria and it should work as a successful and motivating activity in your class. Okay, let's have a quick look in the Q&A and see if we have some questions. So how can we adapt to interactions again like this to online? Again, Terry's going to look at some more online things. How can you reach a high degree to get successful? Again, I think we looked at different motivating activities and why things are motivating. That's the whole idea behind this talk, Shaker. Okay, great. Right, let's move on to the next activity. So my next activity that we're going to put the motivational focus on is a balloon debate. Okay, so now this is not a debate about which party balloon is better, but rather a debate that takes place in a balloon, specifically a hot air balloon, and even more specifically, a hot air balloon that is crashing to the earth due to excess weight. A crash that unfortunately will result in the deaths of all the passengers unless some of the excess weight can be thrown overboard and lighten the load. Now, the only throwable excess weight are the passengers themselves. And we're going to need to choose one that we need to throw overboard in order to save the rest. Now, we're not going to ask our learners to play themselves during this activity. Rather, they were going to give them a famous person from history or a literary figure or maybe a contemporary world figure. In fact, if you've been reading an article or talking about an era in history, you could choose the people from the article or people from that era and put them in the balloon. And you can increase levels of learner agency. Let them choose who they want to be in the balloon. Okay, here are some examples of people you could choose. So to organize this debate, so you need to give your learners a little bit of time to prepare. If they're not very familiar with the character they've been given, they're going to need a bit more time than if they know them quite well. You should explain the scenario, the crashing balloon, and also explain, that all the people on board have decided that given the time left until the crash, the most civilized way to choose the person to be thrown overboard is for each person to have 1 minute to explain why, if they live, they will be of greater use to the world than their companions. So when everyone has spoken, a vote will be held, and the person with the least votes will be ejected in order to save the rest. So, as learners are preparing their 1 minute pitch to save themselves, you need to be circulating in the class, right? You need to be providing them with any functional language they need or any vocabulary. Learners shouldn't be writing a script here either. They should just be jotting down ideas or any phrases or words that will help them. Going back to correction, what do we think here? Do we think it would be more appropriate in this activity to use on-the-spot correction or delayed correction? Remember, on-the-spot correction was for accuracy focus, and we said that delayed correction was for fluency practice. So what do we think is the most appropriate form of correction here? Delayed. Yes, great. So yes, this is definitely a fluency activity. We were asking learners to speak for a minute. So delayed correction is most appropriate. Listen in, make some notes of language that's worth looking at the whiteboard once the activity is over. We really don't want to be interrupting our learners to say, it's has, not have, while they're in the middle of, this impassioned attempt to save their lives with a big speech. Okay, speaking on correction and language, any ideas what sort of language you think might, or what might the language focus be in a balloon debate? Maybe not a language focus, actually. What kind of language do you think might emerge during this activity? Can you just pop in the chat box any kind of what structures, what verb forms, what lexical areas, what sort of things, what sort of emergent language do you think we might get? Vocabulary, future, conditionals, comparisons. Yes, exactly. Past tenses, modals. Great. Superlatives. Okay. Well, you're going to get a wide range, I think. But I think one area that would come up is maybe modal verbs. But of course, it depends on the characters in the balloon and the strategies that different students employ, but it's important, especially with groups of a lower level, to try and predict this language and then make this language accessible in the form of sentence stems, vocabulary lists, make it easy for them. Okay, right, when everyone has said their piece, we're going to hold a vote. Okay, and you have two choices here. You could ask learners to vote for who they would like to save or for who they would like to throw out of the balloon. And this will really depend on the character of the class, but I must say, I did once have a student who came up to me and they said they didn't feel very good having been voted out, and they would have felt a lot better. They didn't mind getting chucked out of the balloon, but they would have felt better simply not having been saved rather than being chosen. That's up to you. I think it probably is more fun, choosing someone to chuck out of the balloon. Get them to write their votes on a little piece of paper, collect them in, and reveal the results. And of course, if you have a large class and you have 7 or 8 balloon debates going at once, the students can run their own votes. Okay, so that was our balloon debate. Let's look at our 5 criteria. Is it competitive? Well, yes, I think it is. This is a question of life or death. So it does, high stakes competition. 100%. Is it collaborative? Now, your first instinct might be to say, well, this isn't collaborative. This is individualistic, and each individual is out to save their own skin. And I'm sure, if this were to take place for real, I bet that would be the case. But, if this were to take place for real, I don't think there'd be a debate. I think Genghis Khan would just throw everyone out of the balloon, and that would be that. But as this is simulated, there's a level of collaboration as all the members of the debate have to buy into the collective drama of the scenario. No, they all have to buy into the what's happening. And this activity is at its best when students really get into character and the collective plight that they're in. So I think it is collaborative. Okay, is it, again, challenging? So again, depends on your students and their levels. I would say that, clearly for learners at the lower end of the Common European Framework, or sorry, elementary or pre-intermediate students, this is a difficult task, and I wouldn't really recommend it for learners that have lower than a B level. So that's intermediate students and above, I would recommend this for. And again, beyond the linguistic challenge, the choice of characters can also influence the level of difficulty. A learner, say, trying to save Jack the Ripper against Florence Nightingale is going to have a difficult job. It's a lot less sympathetic character. You have to think of more inventive arguments. Is this meaningful? Again, you might say no. This is a fictional debate on a fictional balloon between Jack the Ripper, Florence Nightingale, and Mahatma Gandhi. This is the definition of meaningless, you might say. I don't think that's entirely fair, because if you think about it, often learners don't participate in speaking activities because they simply don't have anything to say. They perhaps don't have any strong feelings on a subject, or they have no personal experience from which they can draw, to make a meaningful contribution to the discussion. But by getting our learners to role play a character, especially a colorful one, we're giving them a whole new resource of opinions and life experiences from which to draw. And, this itself can be motivating. Actually, if you're preparing your learners for an English proficiency exam, frequently the very first round of those are really boring. It's where do you live? What's your job? Tell me about your family. And this gets dull and repetitive really quickly. But if you ask your learners to do this activity in the role of, I don't know, King Kong or Count Dracula, it makes things interesting again. And, this actually helps learners to think on their feet, which is a great skill to have in a speaking exam. Okay, final criteria. Is this fun? And again, with the caveat I gave with blockbusters about being fun, about fun being subjective, I'm going to say yes. I've always seen learners having a great time doing this. I asked you a bit earlier on, what could be more fun than foiling your classmates' plans by blocking their path to victory? Throwing them out of a hot air balloon, that's way more fun. Maybe that's just me. Okay, let's have a look in the Q&A. Let's see if there's any questions about blockbusters. Do we have a template of the hexagons? Well, I just made it on PowerPoint, and actually there's a hexagon shape in PowerPoint, so it's really, really easy to make. Is blockbusters effective to students with learning difficulties? I guess if you, if you focus the content to the learners you have and to their needs, I guess it can be, yes. It depends on the learning difficulties, of course. How are the characters distributed, says Anastasia? Well, you can either just give them a character that you think will be funny for your learners to work with, or you can ask them to choose a character, or you can, randomly distribute characters if you want to make it a bit more difficult. And I think Sean is sharing a template of a blockbusters template there. So I think you can have one, whoever that was asking for it. Okay, right, get ready in the chat box again, because in the chat box, I want you to write either African or Indian or I don't know. And the question I'm going to ask you is this an African elephant, an Indian elephant, or you don't know? Let's give you just the elephant on its own. Maybe it will help you see. Indian, I don't know, African, Indian, African. Oh, more Africans come in, Indian, I don't know. African, okay. I'm going to help you. I'm not going to tell you the answer just yet. I'm going to get you to read a text. And after you read this text, it should help you decide. So, right, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, 40 seconds to read the text. And then again, you can put into the chat box African or Indian and how you knew. Okay, so 40 seconds. Let's go. Let's read the text. Okay, let's see some answers. So Rita's got a good trick, and it's actually not one in the text. So Zoe, yes, African, because it has one bump on its head. Exactly. Okay, it has one bump on its head, and it's tallest at the shoulder, so that's why it's an African as well. But a little trick that's not in the text: the shape of the ears is like the continent of Africa, so that's how you can tell. And well, I mean, there's a lot of you saying Indian. I just Googled African elephant, so I'm trusting Google a lot that it's an African elephant, and I think it does fit the description in the text. Okay, but we're not here to talk about elephants. We are here to talk about motivating communicative activities. Now, this text, the more important thing in this text, rather than the topic of elephants, is a language point. So have you guys spotted? Can you see what's the language point that this text is a vehicle for? Have another look if you need to. What language point is contained in this text that we're asking our learners to? Comparatives and superlatives. Yes, exactly. Comparatives and superlatives. There you go. They're in red. So this is an example of a text that we could use in the next activity I'm going to look at, a dictogloss. Now, I must say quickly, I don't think a dictogloss is a good activity for introducing a new language point. For a dictogloss to work, your learners need to already know something about the language point, as they're going to use that knowledge to help them reconstruct the text later. So we start a dictogloss by explaining to our learners that we're going to read them a text. And as you read it to them, you'd like them to write down the main elements that they hear. So you need to point out, look, they don't have to write down everything, and that later they're actually going to compare their notes with the partners and work together to recreate the text. Okay, so really important. They don't need to write down everything, and they're going to work with someone else, and they're going to hear it multiple times. So it shouldn't be a high pressure, they shouldn't feel pressure during this dictation. So, the strength of your group and the difficulty of the text will dictate how many times you should read the text. But I think, a good rule of thumb is maybe just to read it twice. And, while you're reading, you can monitor and see how the group is doing. And you're looking for things like this. A learner might write down this amount, and that looks good. If you think most of them have enough of the text to start the recreation after 1, after 3, then go for it. You can start the next stage. And if some students have less text, you can match them with a partner who has more text. Okay, so here's when the collaborative part of the activity begins. So, and yes, good point there, the speed that you read it out. Good point, Paulus, depending on the level of your students. But here's when the collaborative part starts. Place your learners into pairs and have them compare their notes. They should have both written down slightly different parts of the text. So that's a good place to start for text reconstruction. If they've written down different things, here's where, they should use their knowledge of the target structure to guide them. A learner who knows, that a comparative adjective is normally followed by than can correct their partner if they've written down bigger that, and don't be afraid to circulate here. Help them out, guide them, and this will also give you a good idea how they're progressing, and if you do see your students are having difficulty, just read the text one more time, or, you can bring pairs together to create groups of 4. The more people sharing text, the more likely they are to have very different bits, and that's going to help with the reconstruction. And the more, knowledge you're bringing together as well. Okay, so the final stage of this activity is for learners to compare their finished texts with the original text. And you can either project this on the whiteboard or have it in a handout that you can distribute. And hopefully they're going to notice any areas where the text don't align. And these are, this could be things they've misheard, or perhaps a spelling mistake, or maybe where they've misapplied a rule. And actually, noticing salient aspects of a structure like this is a really good way of helping the process of internalizing that structure and, helping them with their fluency. Okay, for the last time, let's put an activity to the test using our 5 criteria. Is Dictogloss competitive? Well, not in itself, I wouldn't say, but it definitely can be. You can set a time and you can say that the pair whose text is closest to the original at the end of that time is the winner, and then yes, it is competitive. It doesn't need to be. If you have an intrinsically motivated group of learners, the satisfaction of successfully reconstructing the text may well be motivation enough, but you'll know your group and you'll know if that extra motivation of competitive will be necessary. Is it collaborative? So Dictogloss is definitely collaborative. The learners are working together to recreate the text, and this collaboration is vital. They're using their collective knowledge of the target language in the recreation process. So just, a lot of what I said to Blockbusters is applicable here as well. Firstly, the content driving the communication is the language itself. So again, you're encouraging dialogic talk. Remember, that was talk about the topic that you're learning. So remember, this not only improves learning outcomes, but it also sets your learners, your students, on the paths to being intrinsically motivated learners. And speaking to your partner about a language structure is a much safer space for learners to test their hypotheses, and they'll feel freer to take risks rather than, speaking in front of the whole class or speaking to you as the teacher in front of the whole class. Okay, let's look at the next one. Is it challenging? Well, this really depends on the difficulty of the text and the level of your class. What you really want here is a text that isn't easy, but with a bit of collaboration should be well within your students' capabilities to get 80 to 90% of it. You don't want this to be a frustrating activity either. Remember, we said challenging is difficult but doable, and that's what we want. And that will depend on your class and the text that you use, and again, the speed you read it out and how many times you read it out. Okay, going on. Is it meaningful? So again, I think when learners see a clear purpose to an activity, and they see the reason for what they're doing, that this helps to increase motivation. And again, like I said, with Blockbusters, helps growth mindset, helps them see their agency as a learner. Again, they can see by participating in this activity, they will be positively affecting their learning. But you can add additional layers of meaning to this. You can choose a text that's meaningful for your learners on a topic that they find interesting, maybe the lyrics of a song that they like. You could even ask them to bring in a text in their L1. You take that home, translate it overnight, and in the next class, you use this as the text for your Dictogloss. And finally, is it fun? And again, I've certainly seen lots of students having fun doing a Dictogloss, but if you use a dry, uninteresting text and you don't add some competitive elements, maybe it's not fun. Okay, but if you get these first 4 criteria correct, if you get the competitive, you get the levels of collaboration, get the right level of challenge in a meaningful text, I think there really is a great chance that this will be a fun activity. Okay, let's have a look and see if we have any questions in the Q&A. Okay, let's have a look. When should one be concerned first? Stimulate intrinsic or extrinsic, and how? Okay, that's a really good question. If your learners are extrinsically motivated, you probably don't need to worry about that. You need to work on intrinsic elements to help them enjoy the class more and to hopefully move them away from extrinsic into intrinsically motivated learners. And as I said before, you can make a game or an activity competitive. You can't really add those massive extrinsic elements. You can't offer them a job or a place at university if they pass the exam. Are we allowed to ask what presentation tool you're using? I guess you are. It's called Big Marker. How long does it take your students to cope with a dictogloss on average? I mean, that really depends, Anastasia, on the length of the text, on the level of the students, on how well they're collaborating. I would say the key here is monitor. So when you're reading out the text, you want to be monitoring. How much of it are they getting? Do I need to slow down how quickly I'm reading it? Do I need to read it again? Monitor who's got a lot of the text, who's got a little, put them together. Well, okay, another question. How can a task be both competitive and collaborative, where you have teams? The teams collaborate together and they compete against each other in other teams. Okay, well, that is all from me. Let me just move on to my final slide and we'll be ready for a break. I just wanted to say, one last thing. These 3 activities can easily be adapted to online teaching through the use of breakout rooms. And after we've had the break now, Terry's going to be looking at some guidelines for using breakout rooms and looking at some breakout room activities as well. So I hope that after Terry's session, you guys are going to be able to reflect on the 3 activities here and really think, okay, yeah, these could be used in breakout rooms as well. Okay, I mean, that's all from me for now. Time for a break. I'll just check again quickly if there are any last questions. I don't think so. Okay, Sean, I think I'll hand over to you and we can.
Thank you very much, Neil.
Great.
Hi, everyone, again. So we're going to go into a break now, as Neil said. Let me just mute Neil's mic. There we go. So we're going to go into a break again. And we are going to have a 15-minute break. So it is 10 to 7 my time now, 10 to the hour now. And then, so at 5 past the hour, Terry will join in. As Neil said, she'll be picking up on some of the themes of Neil's talk about those online breakout rooms and everything, and continue the journey through motivating through communicative activities. So we do encourage you to take a break. So we do encourage you to walk away from the computer, go stretch your legs, go get a drink. It is important not to sit in front of a screen all the time. So, however, we will be playing a video. So if you want to ignore me and sit here, then we will be playing a video of OUP things that might interest you. So you can sit and watch that. That video will last about 10 minutes. During the video, we'll also be posting up a few things that link to the video. So if you see something in the video that you want to follow up further, then you'll see it on the screen. You'll be able to click on that and it will open a web page and take you to more information about that. If you don't like the thing that comes on the screen with the link, then simply press the cross in the corner and that will disappear off the screen. Okay, so 15-minute break. We will bring Terry back to us onto us at about 5 past the hour. Do go get a drink. I will find out. I will ask you after the video what you did in the break. So do something interesting that you can put into the chat box, and we'll see you in about 15 minutes. During the break, the moderators will still be there. So if you do have questions, please do feel free to put them into the chat box. So we'll see you in about 15 minutes. Let me find the video and put it on the screen.
my name's Andy and I'm an Educational Services Manager for Oxford University Press ELT. I'd like to introduce you to our new professional development modules. We're aware of the need for teachers to keep up to date with their professional development and the demand on teachers' time. Now, teachers can manage their own development independently in a time and space that's comfortable for them. The modules are self-access and take only 15 to 30 minutes to complete. You'll find them on the Oxford Teachers Club.
A teacher nowadays is a person who is more emphatic and gives support to students, trying to understand how they are coping with distance learning.
What is more demanding, however, is addressing my students' social emotional needs. As a teacher, I felt I had to help them work through those feelings of anxiety, depression, or loneliness in the ways I could afford.
I think it's really nice if teachers make that time to either meet up asynchronously on a Padlet, or make the time to say, look, let's meet for half an hour this week and exchange ideas, or even just have a chat.
And as a teacher, I tried to create an atmosphere of mutual support, understanding. I wanted them to leave their fears and worries behind and just enjoy a new way of learning.
Being able to connect with other people and having that reason to get up in the morning and get yourself sorted in a situation in quarantine, say, where you might not really have the motivation to get out of bed, has been really good for structure and just having that connection with people.
So, hello everyone. We've got about 4 minutes until we get underway again. Hope you enjoyed all those little pieces of information about Oxford University Press. And if you need anything, or if you have any questions about them, our moderators are doing a sterling job in the chat box, answering and helping out. So let me get rid of the video and appear myself. There we go. So how's the break going? Everybody managed to walk away? Get some stretching legs. Katie, I didn't see the answer. Did you go for Earl Grey or green tea in the end? The important questions of the day, obviously. Let's put the speaker slides back on. Earl Grey and a chocolate biscuit. Now, surely you had to go for Earl Grey and some carrot cake. No upcoming webinars. You could sign up. Did we not put a link that you can go and click on them? I don't think there are any coming up at the moment, actually. Robert, you might want to keep an eye out on the Facebook page over on Facebook, because OUP do a lot of Facebook lives at the moment. If I have Czech friends to do it, this is my break. This is my break snack. I got one of these today. The best biscuits in the world. There you go, Robert. You enjoyed the outside well, Marion, and did it change in the 45 minutes you were in the room? I ate a plate full of strawberries. That's far too healthy. There's me about to have a coconut fedorka. So fed my cat. She was starving. All right. Herbal tea. Hi, Argentina. So we've got a couple of minutes and we'll be getting back underway again. Don't worry, you're not missing anything. Just me talking inanely, just so you know there's somebody here. Now the biscuits. They're a Czech thing, but then again, there are plenty. Families to get in the way. Blueberries. Wow, you educators are all a bit of a healthy lot. Green tea, banana, blueberries, strawberries. Yeah, it might be strawberry Caesar, but I mean, surely a webinar is a good excuse to sit and eat chocolate biscuits, as Katie is. That's good. Hi, Angelique. Thank you for telling us you're back. Well, I've got a couple of minutes, and I'll bring Terry onto screen. Okay. No more fruit. God, to be unhealthy, teachers. Cookies. There you go, Paulus. Phew. Actually, gooseberries are lovely. I do like a good gooseberry. Mate. Yeah. Bread and cheese. Good. Magnum, yum. I love mate. Yeah, I'm not a great fan of mate, Katie. I got it when I was given it when it was in Uruguay, and I was like, a good cup, excellent. I do have a good cup of ginger tea here. Will you stop it, Robert, with the pizza? Katie, don't let Robert sign up for any more webinars. That's what I say. Like sweets, frappe, that's great. Cup of tea and chocolate biscuit, Catherine. That sounds very, very British. I'm going to find Robert in the system and blacklist his email. Not that I'm vindictive or anything. So good afternoon, good evening now, I guess, for everybody. We are about to get underway again. I mean, hopefully you enjoyed Neil's session. If you did miss any of it, it was recorded. And the session now continues, but with Terry taking over the speaking part of the session. So let's see if she's there and welcome her on to the platform. There we go. So we're changing over to the Middle East from Europe, and there is Terry all ready and rearing to go. So thank you very much for telling me and what you've been eating for the last 15 minutes. And now it's back to Terry. So they're all motivated with chocolate or fruit, I think, is the answer to how to make motivating communicative activities. But Terry might tell us more. Terry, over to you. And enjoy the second half of this webinar.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Sean. And really interesting to listen to the things that you've been doing in the break. I've actually been taking my 2 dogs into a room and shutting them away so that they won't be noisy and that you can hear me okay. But it looks like everyone's been eating some really good food as well. So wonderful to be working with you tonight, and hopefully some of you already know me, and I think there may be some people from Saudi where I'm coming to you from tonight. So yeah, welcome again. Let's get started because I've got lots and lots to share with you tonight, and I want to follow on with the sort of thread that Neil had about, activities and how they're communicative and why they're communicative and all that kind of thing. So yes, good morning, good day, good evening. Let's get started. So my first question to you, seeing as we're talking about motivating communicative activities, I'm kind of switching to the online version of that, or the online area of that. Can you tell me how many of you are still teaching online? Yes. We are here in Saudi for the foreseeable future. Okay, that makes me happy, because as I said, I'm going to be looking at things from the online perspective. All right, so what I want to have a look at tonight is breakout rooms, basically setting them up, how we manage them, how we communicate with our students in the breakout room, and the all-important activities that we can use for the breakout rooms. So another question for you. How are you making your online classes these days? How are you making them communicative and motivating? How are you managing to do that? Or how have you managed to do that? Okay, videos, songs, using breakout rooms, interaction, gamification, nice. Lots of gamification. Okay, games, chat rooms, people saying breakout rooms. That's topical. All right. Quizzes, Kahoot, discussions, super. So my next question then, to kind of pull us more towards the breakout rooms, how often are you actually using breakout rooms in your classes? Are you sort of using them once a week, every day, only when it comes to a speaking activity? Every class, nice. Each class is always, sometimes, quite often, once a week, a couple of once a weeks, occasionally. I think it's really good that a lot of you are kind of regularly using them, because often, super. And some people are saying not often as well, and obviously they have their challenges, and we're going to look into, kind of ways of getting over those challenges today. So what I wanted to begin with doing is thinking about advice for setting up and really using the breakout room. So if there was like one piece of advice that you could say to a new teacher who's never used a breakout room before, it is a must, yes. Someone who's never used a breakout room before, what would you say the number one thing that you would say is the best advice you could give somebody? So for me, for example, I would always say beware of timing. And I'll mention this again and again tonight. Timing's a big issue when you put students into breakout rooms. Prepare the activity well. Yeah. Yes. So Patrick, you've mentioned how long it takes. So don't panic. Patrick's mentioned how long it is. So that's my thing as well, about everything seems to take a lot longer in a breakout room. Clear instructions. Yeah, that's one of my pieces of advice as well. Timing again, monitoring. be in every room equally. Emma, that's a really good point. Teacher talking time, monitoring. Thanks, Dora. Monitoring is coming up again and again. Great. Okay, so what I wanted to do is kind of share some of the ideas that I have about how to sort of set up a breakout room. So there might be some of you who haven't actually used breakout rooms, and there might be some of you who have used them but not as successful as you'd want them to be. So this is just a sort of, let's say, a toolkit that you could follow and sort of check off when you're lesson planning that might help you to make better use of breakout rooms. So the first thing I would say to do is let the students know what you're doing, let them know that you're going to be in a breakout room. And that's exactly what you would do in a face-to-face class as well. You know, you would give instructions as to, okay, next we're going to work in groups, you're going to work in pairs. So let the students know what they're going to do. We would give them simple instructions and always a demonstration. And then to make sure that they have the materials that they need. And if they're doing a role play or it's some kind of discussion, that they have the roles assigned to them so they know exactly what it is that they're going to be doing when they get into the breakout room. And then obviously then putting them into the breakout room. One of the things that I found with using breakout rooms is that takes a little bit of time depending on the platform that you're using. So, you know, it feels like a long time to us, but it could be sort of 5 or 6 seconds of making sure everyone's in the room that you want them to be in, and that sometimes people come out and go back into the main room. You can get technical issues. What I do, I think that saves a lot of time as well, is to send out a message, a written message to breakout rooms with the instructions that I gave them before. Because I find when I'm working with teachers in breakout rooms and I'm popping into different breakout rooms, that they're often going, what were we here for? What were we supposed to do? So when they have that written message, they've got it there and they know what the kind of instructions are and what they have to do. And then to pop into each room, to go in and just check that everyone's okay. You know, have you got your video on? Can everybody hear each other? Do you know what you're doing? And then, of course, to sort of set a reminder about the time, which is what I would do in a face-to-face class as well. And then to call them back into the main room to deal with the feedback. So I think apart from 1 or 2 of these are similar to what you would do, you know, with a regular activity, how you would set it up. So let's have a look at some of the comments we've got here. Anna gets into each room and shares the slides. There you go. Carefully design the worksheet. And it really does take time to go from one room to the other. And I think timing is the big issue, isn't it? Yes, the activity can be finished by the time that you've gone through all the rooms. And then it can be tricky to sort of set up that feedback time. Patrick says it does sound like Big Brother. Observe a lot of breakout rooms at the same time. Yeah, that would be nice. It's interesting you say that, Vic, that they won't always have the camera on. That's definitely the case here in Saudi. As long as they've got the microphone on, or I encourage them to sort of use the chat box as well. Yes, limited time, Nasser. I would agree. Okay, so thinking about the first activity that you would have for your breakout room, the first time that you're going to put your students into a breakout room, and what would be a good activity. So in my experience and with teachers that I've worked with as well, I think it's really important to keep things super simple. So if you haven't used breakout rooms before, or you're using breakout rooms with a set of students who are not used to them, these are some of the things that I do just right at the beginning. So making sure that everybody, this is the student's task. This is all they have to do in the very first breakout room activity. Can they all turn on their microphones? Can they all put on their videos? Can they see each other? Michelle says discussions. Yeah. So in terms of discussions, Michelle, I would agree. But at the beginning, all I want them to do is to greet each other, just to say hello, who they are. And then can they actually share a document on their screen? So, you know, if you want them to pull up documents and talk about them or work on them, making sure that they can, you know, that technically they can do all of those things. And that's all I want them to do in the first breakout session. Something else that I wanted to think about as well is sort of etiquette of a breakout room. Things that we want our students to be aware of and maybe not to be doing, and to be kind of working together better. So this is something that you could use before you actually have students in breakout rooms. So it's kind of like in a face-to-face classroom where you might do classroom rules or classroom expectations. So, you know, you could give your students a set of statements like this and ask them to think about, is this a good idea or a bad idea? Is this sort of true or false in terms of how we're going to operate together in the breakout rooms? I think, Angelina, etiquette is very important. And Helen, yes, slipping into L1 is a big deal. So I'm going to give you like, let's say 30 seconds to read through these. You don't have to answer them in the chat box, and just think about if these are true or false. If you were to give these statements to your learners, would they be, what sort of answers would you want them to come up with? And in a few seconds, I will share with you the answers, because I'm sure we'll all agree on them. And the point of the exercise really is, you know, for us not to sort of tell them what they have to do, but to get them thinking about it. Great, we've got some good answers in the chat box there. Adriana's not sure about number 5. Number 5 was thrown in there as a, let's see what you think about it. Because it is hard often to get students to just get talking about something. But I think if they get in the habit of talking about whatever they want, then obviously we're going to come off our lesson aims and objectives. Yes, and a few of you are saying you're not sure about number 2. I think in terms of what we've already discussed about timing and the issue of timing, and how everything just takes such a lot of time in breakout rooms, I think learners do need to realise that timing matters, and we need to give them you know, the amount of time that the activity is going to take, and then give them reminders for it. So here's my next slide. I'm happy for you to agree or disagree with me. The point of the exercise is to give students a sort of, you know, a kind of set of ideals for the breakout room, and for them to think about what they're doing. So moving on to what sort of activities work best in breakout rooms. So I would suggest something simple and short, especially at the beginning when you first start using communicative activities in the breakout rooms. And then I'd like to kind of link back to what Neil was saying, because all of the ideas about motivating communicative activities, I think, still are relevant for breakout rooms. So we want activities that are competitive, that are collaborative, that are challenging. So we want students working together. We want the idea of there being some challenge. We want it to be meaningful in terms of what does it mean in their lives, or what does it mean to their learning? And of course, fun as well. So I don't think there should be a difference in terms of what motivates students to actually communicate just because we're using breakout rooms. You've got some fun we've got in here, quizzes. Let me just go back a little bit to have a look at brainstorming, collaborative, Gabrielle, I don't know where you're from. Simple and short. Great. Jigsaw. Omran, we're going to be having a look at Jigsaw as well. Mehmet says that time is limited. We could, Mehmet, get them doing the kind of quiz about rules asynchronously and then sort of sharing the results. Maria says dialogues, which I think are really good because we want everything to be very communicative. So moving on to look at some of the activities that I want to share with you, and this is the kind of meat of what I want this session to be about that will be useful. I think that anything that is personalized for students can be collaborative, it tends to be meaningful, and it tends to be fun. Because if you think about what we do in our L1, communicatively, so for example, if I was to go to Starbucks with you, I would expect to talk to you about something that's quite personalized in my life. So probably about what's going on with my job, or what's going on with my family, or what I've just done. And I think that is what is meaningful and what's fun and what's sort of real in students' lives. So I wanted to show you an activity that is super simple. It doesn't take any preparation. And it involves learners using their mobile phones, which they are normally obsessed about doing. So basically, they share a photo on their mobile phone with their partner or with their group, and they talk about the photo, and their partners get to ask them questions about it. And it's personalized because obviously, you know, that's either their family or a view or something that they've done recently. And it works really, really well. And it's something they can do in a breakout room. They can share that photo, and then the rest of the students get to ask them about that, and they get to talk about it. So that's something that I've used that's worked quite well, and that other teachers that I've worked with as well. So the idea of kind of Naomi saying, need to practice how to show the photo from your mobile phone. Yep. Picking out from a hat, Diana. So Helen, it could be something that they do to prepare for class before. So they could take something from their mobile phone and then actually share a document. Another idea that I wanted to think about as well is how to kind of get students being collaborative, working as a team, and sort of choosing content as well. So this is a website that I wanted to share with you called Plot Generator. And it's basically used to get students to work together and kind of collaboratively produce a piece of writing. What I find, and I have found in lots of countries, is that students find writing really difficult, and they find writing to be kind of like something that they're not very motivated in doing. So in terms of getting them together to collaborate, to produce writing, I think this is a really good website. So basically, it's a tool to get them to actually generate ideas. And what they do is the website's really neat in that it's a gap fill. So it asks them, for example, in your story, who is the main, the main character in your story? Is it a male? Is it a female? Who's the secondary character? What's their relationship together? Are they enemies? Do they want to help each other? And then basically they just fill in the gaps, the spaces together, and then they generate a story. What you can do then is get the students into the breakout room, get them working on Plot Generator together, and then they can actually create the stories kind of together and sort of work on that as a group or as as just two together. Let's just have a look at picture stories work well. Yeah. Natalia's saying that she's already done that with her students. Good for a round robin. Yeah, Plot Generator is really popular because students get to answer questions like, is the story set in the desert? Is it in the countryside? Do the two characters argue together? Who's the enemy? So that's something that they can work on in breakout rooms together. I wanted to also bring up the idea of students working together as a community to actually kind of solve problems together. So this is something that I have used with, actually I've used it with teachers, but teachers have also used it with students. So the idea is that first of all, you ask students to anonymously write down a problem, any kind of problem that they're finding with their English, like a specific skill that's a problem. Yes, with any sort of Google Documents, yes. And the idea is that every week they have the opportunity to share a problem that they're having, and then a student or the teacher takes out an item from the virtual box, reads it aloud, and then the whole group together think of a way that they can help that student to sort of really solve the problem. And I think this is really good for sort of learner agency as well, because it's students taking control of their learning and then also working as a group to collaborate and thinking about how they can solve it together. Sorry, oh, that's gone forward too quickly. And I've had lots of teachers say that this has really worked, especially with teenagers and maybe young adults, that they don't feel confident enough to talk about a specific problem that they're having, but it also allows the group as a whole to kind of get together and think of a way that they can help that student. Exactly, it gains trust as well, and it allows them and encourages them to work together, really as a group. So another activity that I wanted to share with you, another idea to try, is the desert island this is a kind of collaborative activity where students have to work together and make decisions. Have any of you heard of the desert island activity? Or it's a task really, where students are sort of marooned on a desert island and they have to make decisions. Yeah, Rachel, I like the problem solving activity as well. Good. It's good to hear that lots of you have heard about the desert island activity. So basically, the teacher tells the students that they're stranded on a desert island in the middle of a large ocean. And it's warm during the day, but it gets cold at night. And the students have seen planes in the distance. And they're sure there are no inhabitants on the island. So the first task is for them to individually sit and think of 8 items that they could maybe find on the island, or that they could think are kind of important to survive until they get rescued. And that's the first sort of task that they have to do. And then next, we put them into the breakout rooms, and in groups, they have to then get their ideas together and think of a final 8 items that they might find on the island, that they think, or maybe something that they brought with them to the island that they think would be really important for them to survive until they get rescued. And basically they have to reach on an agreement. So that's the task that they have to do. And again, going back to what Neil was saying about, the really important elements of something being motivating and collaborative, what's I think is neat about this is that it is collaborative because they've got to agree on something, and that can be challenging and meaningful them to get together, and I think it's fun as well. But the other thing that I think we can use this activity for as well is how focusing students on how they actually carried out the task. So getting them back into the breakout rooms and getting them to think about how did they work as a team. So we're bringing in those critical thinking, the learner agency. So getting them to think about how did you work together? How did you manage as a team? Did you take on roles? Did you actually come to a decision? Were key issues resolved? So you've got this idea of kind of critical thinking on reflecting back on the activity. So not just sort of carrying out the activity, but sort of doing it in the breakout room and then getting some feedback and then going into the breakout room and thinking about how they work together as a team. Sounds like Lord of the Flies. Yeah, it could be. So here's a question to you. Do you think that breakout rooms are only for the specific speaking activities that I've mentioned? Or can we use breakout rooms for something else? Any other kind of activities or tasks that are not really speaking specific that we can put students into breakout rooms for? Okay. Almost all tasks, Marion. as long as interaction and collaboration are involved, yes. Sure. Oh, great. Some good ideas. Good. I like to see that gap filling, drilling grammar, writing practice. Speaking one-to-one, collaborative. Yeah, I guess the thing I wanted to reiterate here is you don't have to have a specific speaking lesson or speaking activity to use the breakout rooms. And I just wanted to talk about some of the other things as well that we can use them for. So I wanted to look at Edwordle as well tonight, which obviously is based around word cloud. So if you're not familiar with what a word cloud is, it's kind of an image made up of words used in a particular text, where you get the size of each word indicating the frequency of how it's used. So the more often a specific word appears, then the bigger and the bolder it appears actually, kind of in the word cloud. So Edwordle is again a free website that I wanted to talk about that is a tool for editing word clouds. So again, we've got this initial word cloud that's generated from an input text, and you can change the size, you can change the color. And I think it's really neat for lots of different activities that you can use and, within, and you can have students use within, put them into the breakout room as well. So thinking about revision of texts, you could actually paste in short texts that students have looked at recently, then show them the word cloud, and then just see if they can recreate the text in kind of, you could do that in groups or pairs. So that's one way to use it. Also prediction. So if you're going to be working with a text, you could put the students into the breakout room with the word cloud and get them to predict the text, the ideas of the text that's going to come up from the words. I think it could be also useful for looking at vocabulary that students might not, getting students to work together and think about the words that they don't already know and look them up in dictionaries from the word cloud. And something that a teacher mentioned to me recently is when students are working on dialogues and you want them to produce those dialogues, often they can sort of memorize dialogues and it not be very natural. So if they just get the word cloud of the dialogue, then they can look at that and try to reconstruct the dialogue from the word cloud, and that it kind of can make the dialogue a bit more natural. And then also thinking about students writing a short text of personal information about themselves that they can themselves turn into a word cloud and then share it with other students for the students to ask questions about it, and sort of at the beginning of the term share information about themselves as well. So I'm just looking, we've got 5 minutes. Another activity that I wanted to share with you or remind you about is jigsaw readings. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with those, but for those of you who are not, when you take quite a lengthy text and you want to sort of break it down with students, it can be a good idea to divide up different parts of that text, have a group of students take away a paragraph into a breakout room. They summarize what's in that paragraph, and then they share it together with the group. So they're practicing their kind of summarizing skills. It's collaborative. I think it can be challenging as well for them. And the idea is then they come into the main room and they sort of share ideas and put together the jigsaw reading, which could be through a comprehension question, or it could be through sort of general summarizing. Just out of interest, how many of you used jigsaw readings in breakout rooms? I noticed somebody before said that they used it. Has anyone else done that? Anyone used a jigsaw reading in a breakout room? Okay. Something else I think that perhaps people haven't thought about before is checking answers. So I think, you know, when you do a listening activity and it's really challenging and you want to get feedback from students, one thing to do that you would normally do in a face-to-face class is you would ask students to sort of turn to each other and say, you know, check your answers together. I don't think there's any reason why in an online classroom we can't get them into a breakout room really quickly and say to them, check your answers together, come back into the main room and we'll look at it. I think it gives them a lot more confidence to be able to sort of, ask each other what their answers are in a group or in pairs, and then be able to come back into the main room and do feedback and feel more confident about it. All right, so thinking about a sort of summary of what I've looked at tonight, we've looked at kind of managing breakout rooms and sort of best practice. We looked at a photo swap that we could do with looking at, the mobile phones and sharing a picture. We looked at the collaborative writing activity where students get together, they create the story themselves. There was the desert island activity as well, where they reflect back on what they've done, how we can use jigsaw reading activities, and then going into breakout rooms to check answers. So my last question to you is, out of each of these activities or ideas, what would you like to take forward, or what are you going to take forward and actually use in the classroom or think about to take forward? Or of course any questions that you have as well. I like the desert island and the jigsaw reading. Photo swap is so good because it's so easy. Everyone likes to talk about something, a photo on their phone. Word cloud tomorrow. And I'm sure that you're all going to be using Neil's ideas as well. Especially Blockbuster. There were lots of comments about that. Oh, it's good to hear that they're all useful. Sultana, that's almost everything. And I hope that you managed to use the word cloud in the breakout room as well. The desert island is always a good thing. It always generates lots of communicative activity. Katie, I agree. The easier, the simpler. Hiram, I don't think it is always necessary. Plot generator is good, Melissa. Students love the plot generator because they find writing so difficult. It just generates the ideas. Excellent. Thank you. I wanted to say thank you very much to all of you for being so interactive. Thanks for your ideas and your answers, and it's been really good to work with you this evening. Thanks, everybody.
There are a couple of Q&As if you want to deal with a couple of them. Terry, you've got a little bit of time. If you click on the Q&A tab.
Sure. Okay. When not to use breakout rooms. I would suggest when not to use breakout rooms when I think it's about when to use a breakout room. If you keep it simple and very achievable, that's when breakout rooms seem to work best. Oh, there's quite a few here. Let me just go back. When else besides breakout rooms can you? I think the thing about using breakout rooms is that when we're not, we want all classes to be communicative and we want students to be producing English. All we've got when we're online is the breakout rooms. So the breakout rooms are to make our classes more communicative. So that, basically that's when we kind of want to be using them. Let's have a look. Find it better student. Find it better concerned to have checked the answer before. That's certainly a method that you could use, Katie, to have checked the answers together before returning to the main room. And that possibly would save you some time as well. When students are reluctant to cooperate, Jose, that happens in Saudi Arabia as well. Some students don't cooperate as much in a breakout room, but I think also shy students find the breakout rooms kind of like a safer space as well. And I think the more you use them, the more the students get used to it. And it's about kind of being patient and reminding them that that's the opportunity that they've got to be communicative and how important that is for their learning. How can a teacher be with all groups in the breakout rooms to listen to each other? Yeah, I think that is really, really difficult. And this comes down to the timing issue as well of, going into all the breakout rooms to check that everybody is okay, they're on task, and to manage to collect the feedback that you want to do as well. But I think as teachers and me as a trainer, you get better at that as well. So it's kind of going in, looking around, is everyone doing what they should be doing? Now I've got to listen to actually what they are doing and then pop into the other breakout rooms as well.
Probably time for one or probably two more at maximum.
I'm trying to go back. There's quite a lot of them. Is there a possibility to give written feedback to small groups after the breakout room? I think Nicholas, I think that is possible if you're able to compile that feedback. That might be a more effective way of doing it. But it's all about timing, isn't it? And managing to collect together that information. I still think it's more useful to gather the information that you can and give feedback to the whole group, if that helps. How do you choose to put students into breakout rooms randomly? I think that depends on the task, Svetlana. It really depends if you know your students really well and you want certain students work. Same as a face-to-face group. You want certain students working together, or you just kind of want them to work together randomly. That would depend on the task and possibly sort of abilities and different learning styles as well. I hope that helps everybody. I would say, Dinara, that you can use breakout rooms with any level. Again, it depends on what you're expecting them to do in the task and how long you're going to leave them together to do that task, and how much time that you've got. Okay, thank you very much, Claudia, as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, Terry, and apologies for those questions that didn't get answered. There were a lot of questions about Neil and Terry, but they did pick the ones that were kind of most relevant and most kind of contextually came up for a lot of people. So thank you very much, Terry. You can switch off and go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Release your dogs from captivity, I think is what you needed to do, wasn't it? And we'll just say thank you to everyone for joining us this evening. Just a reminder before we go that you will get the follow-up email, and in that follow-up email there will be a link to the recordings of this session. There'll be a link to a PDF of the slides, so you can go over and see all those activities again and how they were run, etc. And for those of you who need it, there will be that all-important link to a certificate of attendance. And just a reminder that there is one certificate that will apply for all 3 days. I know some of you have been here for all 3 days, just one certificate for that. And if you did miss out the other 2 days, then look for the recordings going up on the OUP team in the OUP Teachers Academy in the near future. So thank you very much. Thank you, Bella. That's very nice to know. Thank you for the comment. So thank you all for joining us. Stay safe. Enjoy your tea. Enjoy your chocolate biscuits. Enjoy your fruits and everything else. And we'll see you again at another Oxford University Press event. Goodbye for now, and have a good rest of day.